And we are right at the top of the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and be mindful of everyone's time. We'll get started and we'll, of course, welcome more folks into the room as they're able to join us. Um, my name is Taylor Teichman. For those who may be new to our ECHIA webinar series, I'm the Youth Development Coordinator with our Pennsylvania Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness program. And now to get us started, I would like to introduce this morning's guest speaker, Dr. Rajni Shankar-Brown. This is her third installment. She's been with us December, January, and February for our webinar series. So we're so grateful to have her in this space with us. For those who may be joining and meeting Dr. Rajni for the first time, she is an internationally renowned and award-winning community engaged educator, scholar, artist, poet, author, and human rights activist. She is a distinguished professor and chair of social justice education at Stetson University in DeLand, Florida. With over 3 decades of advocacy, Dr. Rajni has held leadership roles across nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and educational institutions. She has partnered with the United Nations, served as equity co-lead for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and was the first woman of color to serve as president of the National Coalition for the Homeless Board. Her work has impacted communities globally with a focus on ending poverty, homelessness, and creating a more inclusive world. And we're so grateful that she is joining us this morning to share her wisdoms and inspirations with us. So I will pass that off to you, Dr. Rajni. Thank you so much for being with us again this morning.
Thank you so much, Taylor, and welcome everybody. Happy New Year again. Happy February. I'm just always so grateful to be in community with everyone here. This is such a space of love and hope, and I always feel the good energy just radiating out of the screen as everybody was coming on. It's just, yeah. So thank you all for being you. And thank you also for our Center for Schools and Communities for helping to create and make space, important space to bring us together to be able to pause in all of the busyness of what we're doing to continue to learn, reflect, and grow. And so today we're going to talk about compassion fatigue. And, the title today is Refuel. And I'm going to add a hashtag repeat on that. And we're going to talk really about what is compassion fatigue, different pieces, again, that are leading to mass compassion fatigue and even leading to burnout. There's connections there that are really important to understand. And also to remind all of us collectively what we can do to both address and prevent compassion fatigue so we can continue to do the important, very much needed work that all of us are doing in our world. And here in this opening image, you see kind of the ventricles of the heart and the lungs. And I always love, even when you look at the human body, if you start to look at different pieces of the body, there's these reflections of nature. Just like when we look at nature, you can start to see the reflections of our body, even thinking about things like nerve systems and then looking at root systems, all of these kind of interconnections that remind us of life, of growth, of presence. And I think one of the things we're finding right now as we talk, especially across the country, globally even, but especially across the country and in certain states with magnified challenges. And I will say Pennsylvania is one of those states. Florida, where I live, is one of those states. The compassion fatigue is so real. And for so many, it is showing up in all sorts of physiological and social emotional ways. But what we find is that many times folks in caregiving capacities, we train ourselves to just kind of push all of that aside and just go, keep going, keep going, keep going. And that, go mentality, a lot of times it stems from our own acknowledgement of how important this work is, how urgent it is, our passion, the very thing that brought most of us to this work, because for most of us, it is not the income, right? And so that passion brings us to this work. But what we also know is that is not sustainable. And it will end up showing up in a number of ways, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways. And sometimes those symptoms might not show up right away, but eventually they will show up. And we want to be very careful so that we can protect our well-being so we can keep doing this work. And we can also thrive and model for our own children, our own youth, our schools and communities the importance of well-being. And so we're going to talk about all of those things today. And I know we're all meeting today here in the middle of a week on a Wednesday. January already behind us, February now, quick and swift in motion. And so, wherever you are at this moment, give yourself the gift of 3 deep belly breaths this morning. You can just get comfortable with wherever you are. Take a moment. If your nostrils are not stuffy, you're going to breathe in through your nostrils. You can even do a count, like maybe breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and then you can exhale for 4. And we have many different breath or prana exercises. Across cultures and history, breath has been one of the most used medicinal tools. And we know even today, doing studies, that when we practice breathing with intention, there are immediate positive benefits to our body. And we do not breathe as deeply as we need to. That is what medical science is now showing us. And a lot of it is because of the pace of life that we live in. And so to slow down, even when it feels like we can't slow down, the lists are so long, to take that deep breath can be a real gift and something we can offer ourselves every single day. Yeah, it doesn't take that long. So 3 deep breaths, you can do it in a way that's comfortable for you. Thank you for that. Your body thanks you for that. Um, and one thing I would share is, you can play with this breath exercise. Again, it took us not even a minute, right? You can fit this in if you're having in between meetings, right? Just take a moment to go somewhere and just take those deep breaths. Because again, your blood pressure is going to lower your heart, all of these good things. Heart rate stabilizes. You get these endorphins that are, happy endorphins kind of flowing through your body. And when you do it, practice also play around, right? You can do a steady exhale where you kind of linger and make it long. You can also, if you are really stressed and tense one day, you can just go somewhere, maybe step outside. And when you do your exhale, you can literally, you can make sounds as you exhale, right? The body literally, along with kind of audio of sound, allowing all of that tension to escape. And so you can play with this. Breath has so many different ways to play, and it can be just such an abundant gift. So today we're going to talk about compassion fatigue and this idea of how, along with compassion fatigue, we need to think about the prevention piece, right? Not just addressing it, but how do we also work on preventing it and looking at signs before we get to complete exhaustion, complete compassion fatigue, which often also has those interwoven ties to burnout. And so self-love, it is so important. And it, has to also be juxtaposed with community care. We need self and community care and love. And we are in a time and in a society and often in systems that make us feel guilty to pause, slow down, and take the time we need for ourselves. We also sometimes make ourselves feel guilty, right? I know I still, I have the challenge of feeling guilty when I slow down sometimes because I know there's all this work that has to be done. It's important. But I also recognize that if I don't do this, that work is not going to be done. I'm not going to be sustained in this journey. And also, I may unleash unintentional harms in the very work that I am doing that is intended to be done with love. And so these are things that we have to kind of wrestle and think about in all of our different identities that all of us carry and the stories we all hold and carry. And all of us, even when we think about compassion fatigue, there are layers of compassion fatigue. We often kind of talk about it in the present moment of an individual body experiencing it. But we also have to understand that compassion fatigue, there are different layers of that. And even just like we talk about generational trauma, in a way, there is generational compassion fatigue. And in the work that we all do, certainly, certainly true. Because often you think about it, right? We are battling every day against things that have taken hundreds of years and generations, right, to build these systemic harms that are happening to our communities, right, to our children, our youth, our families. And often, because of the very landscapes that we live in, as we make movement in one area, we often find that something else moves backwards or something else, right, is now suddenly defunded. Let me talk it right in language, sadly, that all of us are understanding and knowing with all of the funding cuts that we're experiencing all over for vital work, within the educational sector, right? And even within McKinney-Vento and all of the pieces that are instrumental for our families and our schools and our communities. And so that can also be very frustrating, disorienting. It can also, create this kind of question, even if we're not presently asking it to ourselves of, is what we're doing making a difference? We're showing up, we're pouring ourselves into this every day, and then it feels like another hurdle, another block, right? It's endless. It is endless. And yet, we've got to step back and remember the bigger picture, right? Remember that even when we think about all of the wonders, my daughter's reading about the seven wonders of the world and architecture now. She goes on these different kinds of streams. And when we think about all of these beautiful things that have been built in our world, they haven't been built in one day, right? It takes time. It takes collective community. It takes rest in order to have the energy to be able to pour in. And so these are things we want to keep in mind, especially knowing that the work that all of us are involved in is significant, critical work. We are working to make our communities and our schools more equitable, knowing that for so long we focused on equality, giving everybody the same thing, but knowing that everybody in life has different starts, different circumstances. We have history that follows. And when we talk about poverty and homelessness, all of these systemic and structural pieces are part of that narrative, that story, that living story. And so as we're doing the work to make things more equitable, that is heavy work. As we work to word liberation, that is heavy work. And when we pair that with the realities that we are all living in, times where disparities are growing at extreme rates, and we're seeing that in our schools, right? How many of you are seeing in your own communities just increased poverty? And you can use the chat box. Let's even reflect for a moment. Are you seeing increasing, growing disparities in your community at this present moment? Yes or no? What's happening in your communities, in your schools? And maybe take a moment to share in our chat. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's bad. I feel like I can't help some of the neediest. Yeah. Yeah, lots of yeses, definitely. A lot of resources that used to be available no longer exist. Absolutely, Emily. And that makes all of it tougher, right? Because even often when we had those resources in place, we were still under-resourced, right, in a number of ways. And now to have those pulled, that in itself is adding to the heaviness to our workloads, to the uncertainties, and even in a very realistic way, right? Our ability to operate and function. And this is being paired as we're seeing growing poverty and homelessness, historic highs. And again, when we talk about numbers surging, even when we see the numbers that are being reported, they are often severely underestimated because of the way we do counts. We don't have a perfect system. And all of us at the ground level know so many lives, people experiencing housing instability never show up, even in those numbers as high as they already are, right, with what we're seeing. And the growth is really, it is momentous. And what we're seeing is families, children, youth, fastest growing segment of the homeless population. And in fact, even looking at 24 to 25, I mean, in many communities across the US, in many states, I mean, that growth is up to a 39% or more growth. That is huge. And in addition to that, and you can look at our annual homelessness assessment review, the AHAR, right? Our 2024, in fact, we launched out in 25, but you're going to see a lot of visuals, a lot of graphics. And, as we continue to do that work, it is daunting. To think about. And again, often in our communities, it is our children, our youth, and the other piece, right? I just want to share because we are all connected to children, youth, but also families. And this generational awareness is really important in the work that we do. Older adults over the age of 65 are also one of the fastest growing segments. So it's our babies, our children, our youth, and our elders, right? And so again, a lot of work that we have to do, work that we're all in, right? Every day. And, I see, yeah, services not, no longer there. I'm just looking at our chat here, having a high English, EL population, right? Who are also experiencing attendance issues leading to academic deficits due to fear in the community. Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a very hard reality right now. Um, no matter what our political beliefs are, no matter where we stand, there are certain human rights and certain pieces of our humanity and democracy, right, that are very real for us to pay attention to. And the fear is real in our schools, among diverse communities across Pennsylvania. I mean, you think about immigrant communities, you think about all of the diversity that exists in our schools, because our schools are also more diverse than they've ever been before. And absolutely, that can increase, right? Truancy, as many of you are bringing up, and disconnects. And even since COVID-19, during that time, so many of our students in public schools ended up disconnecting with schools, right? As schools shifted, moved online, services were also cut initially or unstable, even as funding issues occurred. And many of those students never returned, right? And so these are realities, right? For us to acknowledge and hold space for. And as we're holding space and acknowledging that, the other part of that is acknowledging we're carrying all of that as well, right? We see it. We feel it. We are in it. So for many of us, it's not just reading it in a newspaper or seeing it on the news, right? It is not distant. It is part of our own lived experiences. And we often don't make space and time to hold space for that. And we carry that in a lot of ways, right? A lot of ways. Thank you all for sharing. And so, of course, we know that as we think about poverty, Mahatma Gandhi described poverty as the worst form of violence. And I always like to say, it is layered violence and it is multi-generational violence. And it is a violence that even as, someone with lived experience, you work to heal in many ways, but the trauma, the triggers, there's a lot you carry. Violence that harms not just in ways that are physical, but social, emotional, and you end up with these kind of deep, deep wounds sometimes that are there. And for everyone who is helping, right, the helpers, the healers, all of you, all of us in this collective space and community, that violence and poverty we are also experiencing as we are working within the systems to heal and to help. And we know that, again, with disparities, where we used to see 1 in 5 children are living in poverty, in many communities, that has become 1 in 3. And we're talking far below the federal poverty level. Realities that we see all over. Housing, facing a severe lack of affordable housing, lack of a fair living wage. What does this mean? How does it translate? Well, our families, our children are trying to find ways to survive. Sometimes that means living in encampments, sometimes out of cars, sometimes in transitional shelter if you can get in. If there's family shelters, because we know that the issues of lack of family shelters where families are often asked to split up, and that is a trauma in itself. And when we don't have our physiological needs met, it is very hard to function, right? To do all of the other things. And for many of us, as we're tending to grow healthy trees and gardens and communities and schools, we are often met with response societally that are kind of these quick fix responses, right? A little bit of funding, not enough, but you're expected to kind of do the magic work of solving all of it, right? Often, okay, we're going to work here and just cut this little branch that's not growing. But what we know is we have entire root systems that are unhealthy, where we've cultivated and tried to grow things in environments that are not conducive. And for some of us, we are even doing the work of unplanting and trying to regrowth and replant and go back into the roots to make sure we have infrastructure to build things that last, to build things that are healthy and strong. And all of the different pieces of this reality, right? The deeper understandings, the implications, the consequences, the, reality of adverse childhood experiences, which so many of us, the work that we're doing, we are in the midst of helping to address or mitigate or prevent. We know the trajectory of what happens when we don't mitigate, address, prevent, and how that can even lead to early death. So the work that we are doing is essential. During COVID-19, all the way to now, we are seeing what many of you have named today in the chat, also met with a lack of resources, cuts left and right as growth is surging, needs are surging, and all of this we carry, we hold. We try to navigate to the best of our ability, right, as human beings, sometimes expected to be robots. And it's a lot. It is a lot. And we have a lot on all of our plates, our just daily existence. So even if we take our work aside, what we're finding is we are living at a time where the world is so heavy that even for people outside of caregiving work, they are experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout. So imagine what that looks like for so many of us right in this field. So compassion fatigue can be defined in many ways. It's often defined as the emotional residue of exposure, of working with those suffering from the consequences of traumatic events. Sometimes it gets interchangeably used, although there are distinctions, right? And we only have so much time today to get into all of it. But I do have a great handout that I'll share with Taylor. And I have a piece that I just wrote in the NYAR journal as well that I think would connect to today. So I'll share those, Taylor. Maybe those resources can be sent out. But what we know is sometimes it is referred to as vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, but it is real, right? And sometimes we don't even realize that we are experiencing compassion fatigue because when we do, when it shows up, when it starts to exist, we push that down or aside so we can continue to function, do our job, right? Go through day by day to wake up in the morning. And doing that long enough, and when we don't address and prevent compassion fatigue, it can very, very quickly lead to burnout, right? So the connection there is very, very real. They are distinct, but they are very interwoven as well. And so we know burnout is a state of emotional, physical, mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress, cumulative process marked by emotional exhaustion and withdrawal associated with increased workload and institutional stress. And I would say the work that all of us are doing, there's a lot of stress involved. We are living at times where, many of us, we cross off one thing on the to-do list and we add 10, right? Just as we feel good about crossing the one, our emails are ding, ding. Oh, and it's never ending, right? And so, it's real, right? Real. And again, while we have this kind of umbrella of professional trauma and fatigue, and we have these distinct pieces, compassion fatigue being this very kind of heart and pulse there, we want to know those interconnections between all of it, right? Including burnout, because that is really important for us to understand. And compassion fatigue, again, it is often also described as the toll of the cost of caring. Now, it is a toll that is most definitely needed and a toll that is most definitely rewarding as well, right? We choose to show up to care because we love our children, our youth, our families, our schools, our communities. And also the choice of not caring for many of us, that is not a choice, right? When we see so many struggling. But we still have to be cognizant, even as we say we're going to choose to do this, right? We choose to do this because it is important and vital and essential, that there is a cost. And compassion fatigue can also be seen as effectively this kind of psychological, emotional effect of exposure, but also combined with daily stressors. And so when you think about it, so many of us, and we don't often talk about this enough, but even for so many of us in this work, we have our own challenges, right? Even outside of work. We're trying to maybe keep our families healthy as well, right? As we're also working to do all of these other things. Maybe finances are a struggle for us as well. We don't, again, talk about this. I just recently was doing a talk here in Florida because I've been looking at this data, and so many of our educators, social workers, counselors, liaisons themselves are living at or below the poverty line. And we don't talk about this, but this is very real when you start to think about adding that. And also very shameful that we have folks that are doing the essential work, right? Paraprofessionals and educators, who are also, needing supports, food stamps, essential supports, because we don't have infrastructure built in these equitable ways often. And so it's a complex reality, right? And hard uh to often talk about. It's so heavy, right? It's so heavy. Yeah, and I see, right? Absolutely, Gina. Who can afford to rent on their own, right? I live with my parents just so I am not spending all of my paycheck on rent. Thank you for sharing that, Gina. And that is of the reality, right? For so many, because we have such a severe lack of affordable, accessible housing where rent is shooting up to the point where in so many communities, people are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They can't afford rent, cannot afford rent. And housing is a right, a human right? And this is real, right? And I hold space for a moment for this too, because I think, again, it's something we don't acknowledge. Even as we talk about poverty, as we talk about homelessness, as we talk about all of the supports our communities need, our schools need, us in this work, we need supports too, right? And that is, macro structure work that is needed, policy work, legislative work, but it's also at the micro level, making sure we have supports that prioritize well-being, that acknowledge the challenges that we're facing honestly and transparently, making sure we have spaces to just be our authentic selves and to share and hold space for the pains, the anguish, the joys. We also know that mental and behavior health challenges are at an all-time high for our adolescents, our children, families, and for people in caregiving capacities, all of us. Often we train ourselves again to still be able to function miraculously and do all the work. And we show up for everybody else. And it can be very easy to forget to show up for ourselves. And so this is the reminder that all of us matter. We matter, right? Our work matters, but if we are not well, we cannot do the work. And we matter as humans, right? The expectations that we can be immersed in suffering and daily loss and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as being able to walk through water without getting wet. Rachel Naomi Remen. Every day we are immersed in the water, if you will, right? With this analogy. And one of the big problems we are seeing, this kind of culminating systematic issue, is that we are immersed every day and wet and soaking and often not given, or we don't make or prioritize time to dry, to take a moment to dry up, to take a moment to take a beat in the sun before we have to go back into the water again. So what happens is essentially you imagine we're soaked and we're soaked and we're soaked and we're getting up again and going in and going in and going in. And eventually Body, mind, heart, soul can become just drenched and heavy and tired and even sick, which is why we want to make sure that we are working to prevent compassion fatigue. And again, a great resource, if you haven't read this book, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. This is by Dr. Brussel van der Kolk. And, this book, it has a lot of good information. It's one of those things that I've read, more than once, and a lot of stuff has really stuck. And one of the things I want to highlight, from this research and work is that trauma, rather than being stored in a specific physical location, is believed to be stored in the body's emotional and memory centers, particularly the amygdala and the hippocampus, and it can manifest as physical sensations and physiological complications. Muscle tension, autonomic nervous system dysregulation, cardiac issues. And we're doing the medical studies now looking at this, and it's really quite terrifying. And often, I know in our field, so many times we might think that, we're just having gastrointestinal issues or recurrent headaches, right? And we just think, oh, and if we go to the doctor, we're given medicine or told to do this. And sometimes we are not unpacking deeply enough to make these connections that perhaps it's trauma we're experiencing. It's compassion fatigue. It's all of these things that show up and live in very real ways in our bodies. And so I call on all of us to also think about paying attention to the signs, to give ourselves the space and time and love that hopefully and so often we are giving to others, because that is important, right? I see here, Emily says, my partner tends to notice that burnout is creeping up on me far before I do. Got to learn to start noticing those signals much sooner. Absolutely. And this is very true. And I will tell you, often in our field, we have programmed ourselves to operate well below the empty on that fuel tank. And it is so normalized in our climates, our culture, that is how we do. And even as we start to come up a little bit to empty, or even a little above, we actually might kind of falsely feel that, oh, we are thriving. We're doing okay. But what we know is for somebody step back, if you take a medical practitioner, if you take somebody, and often to that point that Emily makes, a partner or someone outside who can observe, right? We are actually in this stage of burnout or in this stage of compassion fatigue are way well below the empty. And we sometimes don't have a big light going on right in front of our faces or alarm sounds that go off. But often there are lights going off. We just aren't paying attention to those signs. So we've got to be in tune with that. And part of that is asking ourselves. So one tip with compassion fatigue, a tip I like to share that is, it works. And you have to try different things in terms of prevention and addressing, because sometimes different things work better for somebody than somebody else. So also give yourself the gift to explore different tools and keep building out your own toolbox to find what works well with your rhythm, your needs, that feeds your spirit, your soul, your body, your heart, your mind. And so one of the things that I do is I print out a literal fuel tank, just what you see here. I print it out, I laminate it, and I have it on my desk. I even have it at home on our family's fridge. And I ask myself, not once a week, Not once a month, not once a year, but actually daily. I try to check in with myself. And even in various moments in my day, even if it's a quick check, I try to ask myself, how am I feeling? Right? How am I really feeling? And that's it's a hard question. Sometimes a question we feel we don't have time to ask, but it is a question that is important to ask. And how am I doing? How am I feeling? And if I am getting close to empty, the next question begins, what am I going to do to bring that back up? We know in our cars when we hit empty, we have to go to the gas station and fuel up, or our car is literally not going to work, right? We're going to stop driving. We have to do the same for ourselves. So, how are we going to fuel up to make sure? And how are we also going to prevent from going into empty or below and continuing to operate on that and normalize that? These are things that are really quite imperative to the work that we do, to the lives that we live, right? Our lives. And I will share very quickly. It's interesting. The fuel tank, I'm going to go back there for 1 second. On our fridge, I have that posted. And I've taught my own children over the years now to try to ask themselves how they're doing. And so my kids do this. My son is now, he's 22. So he's a, grown adult, but often, he will ask me, Mom, you know, how's the fuel tank right now? Right? The check-ins with each other can be helpful. And my daughter, she's 15. She'll go over to the fridge at times and I'll see her literally looking at it and like thinking to herself, where am I? And I watched even actually this past weekend so much on her. I mean, she is in an international baccalaureate in her public high school. She's studying all of these things, has service projects. She's doing lots of stuff. But I literally saw her go down and her finger went by the empty. And then she just like put back her books and agenda that she had. And I saw her go crawl on the couch with a book. And, I was very proud of her. I thought, she's self-regulating, she's doing what she needs. And that's awesome. And that's not always easy to do. Often we feel guilty, we have anxiety because it means we're pushing something else aside to make space and time for that. But here's the thing about rest. Rest is not a luxury or this reward we give ourselves. We often treat it like that. If I get through this whole to-do list, I can just take a breather this weekend, or I can take an evening off. We've got to reframe that to understand that rest is also the work. It is also part of our work. We have to build in intentional rest and well-being. And when we don't, we also often end up harming others in ways, all sorts of ways, from the way we might speak to somebody to, just messing up. Maybe we're taking records or files for a family and we're tired, so we miss something that we may never know, but it could be disastrous in the journey as they move forward towards trying to get services or housing. And so there's all of these kinds of pieces that are built in that we have to be cognizant of. And so as we are doing all of the building, allowing our hands, our heart, our spirit to also take rest so we keep having the strength to push forward. And we have to collectively support each other in this. And we know, the old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first, right? Put the oxygen mask on, and then you're going to be able to help everybody around you in better, more effective ways. So we want to think about self-care and community care as well. I always like to add that it's got to be both in my perspective. But when we think about this self-care, what does that look like for you? And what are some of the areas you can start to expand on, or maybe you're not doing that you can add to your list that you're going to do. And all of us, we have things that we maybe naturally are better at. Sometimes we are better at tending to the mind, or tending just to the body, or tending just to our emotions. And we're not as good at doing one of the others. But we want to think about that holistic rhythm. And I know, again, vulnerable sharing, I am better about, I am creative, and through the arts, I find my care, self-care and love and therapy often. I am always a lifelong learner and doing things to stimulate my mind, and I'm curious and explore. And those are things that I do that I naturally gravitate towards. My physical body, exercise is not something I naturally choose, right? And if I do, it's often my deep breathing yoga that I would go to. But my body needs the other stuff. Actually, the doctors tell me with my bone density loss, with various issues I harbor physically, right? The physical challenges, I need weight training, I need cardio. I have to be intentional to make time for that. And I'm not always good at it. I'm going to admit, right? It's like, okay, have I been good this week? No. I'm acknowledging now, right? In public and with all of you. But taking the moment to be honest with myself about it and now ask myself, how am I going to make sure that I'm still making space for that and doing better? Am I going to have an accountability partner and have somebody check in with me, or a friend? Am I going to go ahead and carve it and put it on my calendar and treat it just like I would when I'm having a meeting with a child that is counting on me? So we have to try to make self-care intentional. And also, part of this prevention mechanism is not waiting till we're falling apart, but seeing signs earlier and building healthy systems, regulatory systems earlier, so we can do that. And think about designing your life. So you're not just going through life, you're living life with intention. So often we get into the rhythm of just going, we're just doing, and we forget to take the time. And I think we are at a good time. February 2026 has just opened up for all of us, unfolding what's yet to come. And so designing a life in a way, and this again looks different, even when we think about dimensions of well-being, that may be very different for all of us, right? Somebody might say, my family is essential, or my spiritual health. Somebody else might say, it's finances for me. I'm really trying to work on that. Whatever those well-being elements are, dimensions that are important, dimensions that you want to grow and manifest, name them. Write them down. Chart them out. Give yourself the gift of making a plan of how are you going to pour into that? What are you going to do? Talk about it. Pick up the phone and call one of your colleagues here, a friend or a family member, or even maybe a stranger you meet at a coffee shop that becomes a friend. Today, actually, February 11th, it is National Latte Day. If you like lattes, celebrate with the latte. It is also Peppermint Patty Day, which I didn't know. My daughter told me that one. So if you like a peppermint patty, go for it. But it's also, we have many days today. I think Women and Girls Science Day, but also National Friend Day, right? Make a friend day. So a good time to make a new friend as well. Or maybe reach out to a friend you haven't reached out to in a while. At its core, self-care is about processing your emotions and reconnecting with yourself. So the question is, how do or will you refuel? And I want you all to take a moment in the chat today, if you can, and respond to this briefly, right? It doesn't have to be long. It can be a word or two. But what is something that you're doing currently or you're going to do? If you're not doing it, that's okay. Let's name something that you are going to do, want to do, plan to do to refuel. Beautiful. Look at this. This is lovely. Just sunlight pouring in, all the good stuff, the refuel. Vacation, 3 weeks with my family. That is amazing. Thrifting, always fun. I love it. Wishing you luck for some good finds, Brenda. Listening to instrumental music, gratitude journal, going outside, absolutely. Walking and listening to music, spending time with kids, the gym, spending more time with family. Pokemon! Oh, yes, I love it. Emily's bringing us back old school. That's awesome. Dinner with friends, taking more time off for a break, being outdoors, working out, hiking or snowboarding. I love a little bit of adventure there. Journaling, taking time just for me. Oh, yes. I love it. Walking the dog, even when it's 2 degrees. Oh, love that. Love that. You love your dog too. Beautiful. And pets are so great. Children, pets, we can learn so much from watching them and how they naturally prevent and address compassion fatigue. They do it naturally in all of these ways. Diamond art, painting, very fun, the creative. So this is awesome, right? Keep it coming, name it, share it, own it, build it into your life. Read, be outside. I love it. Yes, refuel. Find ways to refuel because it's important. And let's support each other in that. Let's remind each other to do it, to make time for it, to not feel guilty. Because in fact, when we are doing these things, that is also part of the work. It is part of the work of justice. It is part of the work of healing. It is part of the work of caring, preventing, addressing poverty, homelessness, all of these inequities that we are working to dismantle. So think about how we're going to help each other. Ask the questions, make space for that in our schools, our communities. Thank you again to CSC for giving us space today to talk about all of these things. Remember to replenish your spirit so that overflow, right? That is important too, the good overflow. Sometimes we allow ourselves to overflow and it's not all the pretty stuff, right? Instead, give yourself the space and time for that. And remember to offer compassion to yourself, grace and love and compassion, because it is not a luxury. It is the work that we do. And think holistically, mind, body, spirit, as you do this. Because again, it's easy to do really well in one area and neglect another. So try to build holistic systems. And none of us, it's hard. It is a daily challenge for me, to be honest. But it's something that I know I have to be committed to, and all of us collectively have to be committed to, especially if we're committed to doing this important work. And so as I close today, I want to wish everybody a wonderful week and month, to love on yourself just as you love on others, and to remember to give yourself a great big hug. And I'm going to, tell you, this sounds silly, but we have medical science now to show that even holding ourselves for a moment and giving ourselves a hug, good things happen in the body. So just like that deep belly breath, take a moment sometimes to give yourself a hug. Thank you for being you and for all that you do. Our world is brighter. And I can tell you from my heart, and as somebody who's had a lot of intersectional traumas in my life, that knowing all of you are out there in the world doing the work, it is such healing and hope. And so keep it up. Keep it up. And I'm going to turn the mic back over to terrific Taylor.
Thank you so much. I'm giving hugs.
Yes.
Hugs to you as well. Oh, thank you
Yes,
so
hugs to
much.
you.
Lots of folks are sharing their gratitude in the chat. I'll drop the evaluation for today's session in one more time so folks can grab that if they need it. Let me just do that here quick before we close out. Here we go. Just for anyone who needs that before we close out the room. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. I hope you are able to move through the rest of your day and your week being well, being kind. Keep on keeping on. We've got this. Thank you again to Dr. Rajni. I'll be sure to send out a recording once it's available, and we'll follow up with some of those additional resources that Dr. Rajni was mentioned earlier as well. So again, thank you all so much. We hope to see you back here on March 11th. We have Rocky Callan. She was one of our keynote speakers at our Paving the Way conference this past fall. She's joining us for a session on March 11th. I did drop the registration link in the chat as well. So we hope to see you back here for our next session on March 11th at 10 a.m. Thank you so much, all.